Picture this moment unfolding at a family dinner table where the air thickens with unspoken tensions, and the clatter of silverware against plates echoes like distant thunder, pulling you into a world where one cutting remark from a parent shatters years of quiet endurance and sets off a chain of revelations that linger long after the meal ends, making you question the foundations of loyalty and favoritism that define so many American family bonds in the heartland. I sat there in our modest kitchen in Dayton, Ohio, the scent of slow-cooked pot roast mingling with the faint bitterness of my mother's boxed wine that she poured a little too freely on nights like this, feeling the weight of a long day at the high school where I taught history to teenagers who dreamed big but often settled for less, much like I had over the years since becoming a single mom to my 8-year-old son Tyler after his father vanished like smoke from a faulty exhaust pipe. My sister Lisa arrived fashionably late. As always, her high heels clicking against the linoleum floor with the confidence of someone who closed million-dollar real estate deals before lunch. Her perfectly coiffed hair and tailored blouse screaming success in a way that made our family's worn-out furniture seem even more threadbare, and as she launched into tales of her latest triumph with a wealthy client from the Columbus suburbs, Mom's face lit up with a pride that bordered on worship, her eyes sparkling in a manner I hadn't seen, directed at me since I was a child reciting multiplication tables without a single mistake. The conversation flowed at first with the easy rhythm of routine family gatherings, Tyler chattering excitedly about his soccer practice, where he scored a goal that had the coach clapping him on the back. And I shared a bit about my classroom project on the civil rights movement that had the kids debating equality with a passion that reminded me why I stuck with teaching despite the paltry salary and endless parent-teacher conferences that stretched into evenings. But then Lisa dominated the narrative, her voice animated and hands gesturing wildly as she described sealing the deal on a sprawling colonial home complete with a pool and manicured lawns, painting a picture of ambition realized that drew nods and sighs of admiration from Mom, who leaned forward with her fork paused midair and declared in a tone as cold and unyielding as a winter gale sweeping across Lake Erie, "Your sister's the one to be proud of, not you," the words slicing through the warmth of the room like a knife. Threw butter left too long on the counter, leaving me frozen with my own fork hovering over a half-eaten helping of mashed potatoes that suddenly tasted like ash in my mouth. In that instant, the accumulated slights of a lifetime resurfaced in a rush, the ballet lessons Lisa got while I mended my own sneakers with duct tape, the college fund that mysteriously dwindled just enough to keep me at the local community college instead of shipping me off to a state university, and the endless comparisons during holidays where my steady job and devotion to Tyler were dismissed as mere survival, while Lisa's flashy commissions were hailed as the pinnacle of the American dream we were all supposed to chase. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks, a flush that had nothing to do with the overworked oven in the corner. But instead of exploding in a tirade that would have turned the evening into a full-blown spectacle worthy of those reality TV shows about dysfunctional clans, I methodically began stacking the plates with deliberate movements that betrayed none of the storm brewing inside, the clink of china against china serving as a metronome to my restrained fury as I met Mom's gaze just long enough to murmur a polite, "Thanks for dinner," that carried the weight of finality without a trace of the sarcasm bubbling beneath. Tyler glanced up with those wide eyes of his, sensing the shift in the atmosphere like a barometer dropping before a storm, but I ruffled his hair gently and guided him toward the door with a quiet word about getting home for bedtime stories, leaving Lisa and Mom in their bubble of approval as the screen door swung shut behind us with a resounding bang that echoed my resolve to distance myself from the toxicity that had festered for far too long. Driving away in my reliable but dented Honda Civic, the cool night air rushing through the cracked windows carrying hints of distant rain and freshly cut grass from the neighborhood lawns, I replayed the scene in my mind over and over, dissecting each word and gesture for hidden meanings, wondering if this was the breaking point that would finally force me to confront the imbalance that had shaped my life into one of quiet competence overshadowed by Lisa's glittering facade. By the time we pulled into our driveway, the modest two-story house with its peeling paint and overgrown flower beds that I promised myself I'd fix one weekend, but never did, Tyler was yawning and clutching his favorite stuffed bear, the one with the missing ear from too many washes, and I tucked him in with a reading from that classic tale of boyhood adventures and loss that always tugged at my heartstrings, mirroring the losses I'd tallied up in my own story without ever voicing them aloud. As the house settled into silence around me, the old floorboards creaking under the weight of settling foundations, much like the cracks in our family ties, my phone buzzed insistently on the nightstand, the screen glowing with a message from Lisa of all people that reads simply, "Call me. Mom's been crying nonstop since you left," a statement that sent a jolt through me sharper than any caffeine rush from the school lounge's ancient coffee machine. Crying? Mom, who prided herself on her stoic Midwestern grit forged from years of widowhood and double shifts at the local diner after Dad's sudden passing, reduced to tears over my departure, it didn't add up, stirring a cocktail of confusion, guilt, and a spark of vindication that made me hesitate with my thumb over the call button, the uncertainty wrapping around me like fog rolling in from the Scioto River. Unable to let it fester through the night, I slipped back out after ensuring Tyler was deeply asleep, the streets quiet save for the occasional hum of a passing trucker on the interstate that bordered our town, and drove the short distance to Mom's place where the porch light flickered like a hesitant beacon, drawing me into the familiar shadows of the house that held so many memories, both cherished and corrosive. I let myself in through the side door with the key I'd had since high school, the air inside still heavy with the remnants of dinner, and something more intangible, a pall of regret that clung to the curtains and the faded wallpaper peeling at the edges. And as I moved quietly toward the kitchen to retrieve the keys I'd left in my haste, my eyes caught on an envelope protruding from beneath a pile of unopened bills on the counter, its edges yellowed with age and addressed in Dad's distinctive scrawl that I hadn't seen in nearly 2 decades. Curiosity overrode caution, and I eased it partially open under the dim light of the pendant lamp, the words jumping out at me like accusations from the grave. "Lisa's future depends on this. Don't let Jenna know." A phrase that twisted my gut with implications of secrets buried deeper than the foundation of the house itself, hinting at sacrifices and deceptions that could rewrite the narrative of favoritism I'd always accepted as inevitable. Heart pounding in a rhythm that matched the distant rumble of thunder approaching from the west, I shoved the letter back into place just as headlights pierced the driveway darkness, Lisa's sleek SUV pulling up with the precision of her professional life. And in a panic I ducked toward the back hallway, pulse thundering in my ears as questions multiplied like weeds in an untended garden. What role had Lisa played in whatever this hidden truth entailed, and why would Mom unravel now after years of steeling herself against vulnerability, leaving me teetering on the edge of a discovery that promised to upend everything I thought I knew about the family I'd poured my life into supporting from the sidelines. That cryptic glimpse of Dad's letter haunted me through the restless hours of the night, its words looping in my mind like a scratched record skipping over the same painful refrain while I lay awake in the dim glow of the bedside lamp. The house around me creaking softly as if echoing the fractures in the family bonds I'd long suspected but never fully confronted, stirring a mix of resentment and reluctant curiosity that propelled me into the next day with a determination to peel back the layers of our shared history without alerting anyone to the storm brewing inside. After dropping Tyler off at school with his usual barrage of questions about why I looked tired and promises to ace his spelling test that afternoon, I retreated to my classroom where the familiar scent of chalk dust and teenage energy usually grounded me. But today it only amplified the disconnection as I half-heartedly lectured on the economic disparities of the Great Depression, drawing parallels in my head to how Lisa's opportunities had seemingly flourished while mine withered on the vine of Mom's selective affections. Lunchtime found me alone in the teacher's lounge, nursing a thermos of reheated soup that tasted more of salt than sustenance, as I pulled out my phone to scroll through Lisa's meticulously curated social media feed. Her posts brimming with images of luxury open houses and client testimonials that painted her as the epitome of Midwestern success, yet now they struck me as a polished veneer hiding the same vulnerabilities that plagued the rest of us, prompting a wry internal chuckle at the irony of her hustle and heart captions when I'd been the one hustling double shifts to keep our family afloat after Dad's death. Reflecting deeper into the recesses of childhood memories that surfaced unbidden like bubbles in a simmering pot, I recalled the countless instances where Mom's favoritism manifested in subtle yet stinging ways, such as the summer when Lisa turned 10 and received a shiny new bicycle with colorful streamers fluttering in the breeze while I, at 12, made do with her discarded hand-me-down model whose chains slipped constantly and brakes squealed like a banshee on every downhill turn. A disparity that Mom justified with a casual wave and the explanation that Lisa needed it more for her paper route ambitions, leaving me to pedal alongside in silence, my knees scraped from falls that no one fussed over. Those early patterns extended into our teenage years, with Lisa earning praise for her part-time job at the mall that funded her weekend outings to concerts in Cincinnati, while my earnings from babysitting the neighbors' kids went straight into a household fund that mysteriously never seemed to cover my own aspirations like art classes or a driver's education course, Mom always murmuring something about responsibility and how Lisa's spark deserved nurturing, a narrative that cast me as the steady rock rather than the soaring eagle, fostering a quiet bitterness that I masked with dutiful smiles during family barbecues and holiday gatherings. Even after Dad's heart attack claimed him when I was 16, plunging our world into a fog of funeral arrangements and sympathy casseroles from the church ladies, Mom leaned on Lisa's budding charisma to rally the family, sending her to real estate seminars with money scraped from his meager life insurance policy, while I stayed home to handle the practicalities of bills and meals. My dreams of studying history at a four-year college deferred indefinitely in favor of community classes that fit around caregiving shifts, a sacrifice I accepted then as the price of being the reliable daughter, but now viewed through the lens of that unearthed letter as potentially a deliberate sidelining. By the time the final bell rang and I collected Tyler from his after-school program where he proudly showed off a finger-painted masterpiece of our family home under a rainbow sky, the weight of those recollections had coalesced into a resolve for a measured act of retaliation that would prick Lisa's inflated ego without descending into outright confrontation. Something clever and anonymous that aligned with the petty humor I sometimes indulged in to cope with life's unfair twists, like the time I swapped the salt and sugar in Mom's baking pans during a tense Thanksgiving preparation just to watch her puzzled frown over the unexpectedly savory pie crust. Settling Tyler with a video game in the living room of our cozy but cluttered home, the afternoon sunlight filtering through lace curtains that needed washing. I fired up my laptop at the kitchen table and crafted a disguised online review on a popular real estate forum frequented by local buyers, posing as a fictional client named Karen from the East Side who had toured one of Lisa's recent listings, detailing in vivid yet vague terms how the agent's enthusiasm overshadowed critical flaws like outdated wiring and persistent dampness in the basement, phrasing it with just enough authenticity drawn from public property records to make it sting without crossing into libelous territory. Hitting the submit button sent a thrill through me akin to sneaking a forbidden midnight snack, a satisfied smirk tugging at my lips as I imagined Lisa's reaction when the notification pinged during her evening wind down, her fingers pausing over a glass of Chardonnay while she scrambled to mitigate the damage to her five-star reputation, a small victory that restored a sliver of balance to the scales tipped so heavily in her favor for years. Yet as the evening unfolded with Tyler and I sharing a simple meal of grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup at the counter, the steam rising in comforting curls that momentarily eased the knot in my chest, my phone shattered the domestic calm with an incoming call from Mom, her voice quivering over the line in a way that stripped away her usual armor of brisk efficiency, pleading through sniffles for me to come over immediately because the words from dinner had clawed at her conscience more deeply than she let on, and she couldn't bear the silence stretching between us like an uncrossable chasm. The plea caught me off guard, stirring a confusing brew of empathy and suspicion as I agreed to visit after tucking Tyler in, my mind racing back to the envelope's implications and wondering if this breakdown was genuine remorse or a calculated pull on the heartstrings that had always tethered me to the family fold. The drive over bathed in the golden hues of sunset that painted the familiar streets with deceptive serenity. Arriving at Mom's house, the porch light casting long shadows across the lawn where Dad once taught us to play catch with a worn baseball glove. I found Lisa's SUV already parked in the driveway. Its sleek lines a stark contrast to my own vehicle's humble reliability, and as I stepped inside, the air thick with the aroma of chamomile tea meant to soothe, but only heightening the tension. Mom enveloped me in a trembling hug before pulling back with red-rimmed eyes to whisper that there was a fragment of truth about Dad she needed to share before Lisa could spin it in her self-serving light, her words dangling like a half-unraveled thread promising to connect the dots of favoritism, debt, and deception in a tapestry far more intricate than the simple sibling rivalry I'd always assumed. Mom's whispered revelation about Dad lingered in the air of her kitchen, like the steam from her chamomile tea slowly dissipating into the evening chill, wrapping me in a web of half-formed suspicions that made the familiar walls of the house feel suddenly confining and foreign, as if the very foundations built on years of shared meals and whispered confidences were shifting beneath my feet, prompting me to nod tightly while Lisa hovered nearby with her arms crossed in a posture that screamed defensiveness, her eyes darting between us like a referee anticipating a foul in a game she thought she'd already won. The conversation stalled there amid the clatter of teacups being set down too forcefully on the saucers, Mom dabbing at her eyes with a napkin that bore faint stains from countless dinners past, and I excused myself under the pretense of needing fresh air, stepping out onto the back porch where the night air carried the earthy scent of impending rain mixed with the distant hum of traffic from the interstate that always reminded me of escapes never taken, my mind reeling from the partial truths she dangled without fully committing to the plunge. Sleep evaded me that night back in my own bed, the sheets tangled around me as visions of Dad's face superimposed over the letter's words played out in relentless loops, his hearty laugh from backyard barbecues clashing with the specter of hidden burdens that might have accelerated his heart's betrayal, leaving me to stare at the ceiling fan's monotonous whirl until the first hints of dawn crept through the blinds, illuminating the dust motes dancing like elusive clues just out of reach. Feigning illness to my principal over a hurried phone call that morning, citing a stomach ailment that sounded convincing even to my own ears, I spent the day ensconced at my kitchen table with Tyler shipped off to a friend's house for the duration, the laptop screen glowing like a digital detective's lantern as I delved into public records and archived news clippings from the local library's online database, uncovering threads of financial tangles that wove through our family's history in ways that cast Lisa's meteoric rise in real estate into a far less glamorous light. What emerged from the digital detritus was a pattern of close calls, foreclosure notices on the family home narrowly avoided around the time of Dad's death, followed by Lisa's first big commission that mysteriously aligned with a lump sum transfer from Mom's accounts, whispers in old forum posts from disgruntled clients about her aggressive tactics on property flips that skirted ethical lines, including one deal where unreported liens on a Victorian fixer-upper nearly dragged the buyers into bankruptcy, a mess that Mom had quietly helped resolve by dipping into savings earmarked for my education. The very funds that forced me to piece together a teaching career from night classes and student loans while Lisa jetted off to certification workshops in flashy hotels. The discoveries hit with the force of a revelation long overdue, painting a picture of favoritism not born from innate superiority, but from a desperate patchwork of cover-ups, where Mom funneled resources toward the daughter who promised quick returns, leaving me to navigate the slow grind of stability with the scraps, a dynamic that now fueled a bitter amusement at how the American dream we'd all been sold often masked such gritty undercurrents of inequality right in our own backyards. That afternoon, as the sun dipped lower casting elongated shadows across the lawn where Tyler would later kick his soccer ball in oblivious joy, the accumulated evidence ignited a spark of vengeful ingenuity within me, the kind that simmers with the satisfaction of writing a long imbalanced ledger without resorting to the blunt instruments of confrontation that would only entangle me further in the family fray. Drawing on the forums I'd scoured earlier, I created a burner account under the innocuous handle of Eastside Homebuyer and infiltrated a vibrant community group for suburban moms on social media, Platforms teeming with advice on everything from PTA fundraisers to home renovations, where I posted a seemingly earnest cautionary tale about a recent real estate experience that bore all the hallmarks of Lisa's style. Overhyped charm masking structural nightmares like sagging foundations and hidden mold, complete with a fabricated yet plausible anecdote about an agent who dazzled with market stats but glossed over inspection red flags, attaching a generic stock photo of a charming facade cracked at the seams to drive the point home without direct accusation. The post gained traction almost immediately, comments rolling in from women sharing similar war stories and tagging agencies for verification, and I watched from my screen with a chuckle that bordered on glee. Envisioning Lisa's sleek office phone buzzing with alerts during her power lunch, her composed facade cracking just enough to force a hurried damage control session that would remind her that not every stage was rigged in her favor. A witty jab delivered from the shadows that echoed the subtle digs I'd endured for years, but now reversed with the precision of a well-aimed dart. As twilight settled and I prepared a solitary dinner of pasta primavera that filled the house with garlicky aromas meant to comfort, but only underscoring my isolation, the thrill of my digital strike began to ebb into a tide of introspection. The steam from the boiling pot mirroring the rising vapors of doubt about whether this path of petty reprisals was empowering me or merely perpetuating the cycle of resentment that had poisoned our family dynamics since childhood, making me question if the audience in my own life story would cheer my cleverness or shake their heads at the futility of such small-scale wars. Tyler's return brought a temporary reprieve, his animated recounting of playground adventures pulling me into the present with hugs and laughter that grounded me amid the turmoil. But the fragile peace shattered when my phone rang with Lisa's name flashing insistently, her voice slicing through the line like a shard of ice as she accused me point-blank of orchestrating the online smear campaign, her words laced with a venom that revealed cracks in her armor I hadn't anticipated, demanding to know if jealousy had finally driven me over the edge after all these years of playing the dutiful shadow to her spotlight. Denials tumbled from my lips in a practiced cadence, feigning bewilderment at her paranoia, but she pressed on undeterred, announcing her intention to confront me face-to-face within the hour. A declaration that sent my pulse racing as I paced the living room, the rain now pattering steadily against the windows like an impatient drumbeat heralding the storm. True to her word, Lisa arrived as the downpour intensified, her SUV splashing through puddles in the driveway before she burst through my front door without knocking, water dripping from her coat onto the entryway rug as she fixed me with a glare that mixed fury and something perilously close to desperation, the air between us crackling with the electricity of unresolved grievances finally igniting. We stood there in the hallway, Tyler wisely retreating to his room with a video game as his shield, while Lisa unloaded a torrent of defenses about how she'd clawed her way to success without handouts, insisting that Mom's pride was earned through sweat and risk rather than the safe harbor I'd chosen, her barbs landing with the precision of someone who'd rehearsed them in the rearview mirror during her drive over. But then, in a pivot that stole the breath from my lungs, she stepped closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush amid the drumming rain, revealing a fragment of the family's darkest secret, that Dad's death hadn't been a simple cardiac event, but precipitated by a web of lies involving a business venture gone sour, one that implicated all of us in ways she alone had shouldered to protect the fragile peace. Leaving me staggered in the doorway as she whirled away into the night, her taillights fading into the sheets of water and plunging me into a vortex of questions about the true architects of our fractured legacy. Lisa's rain-soaked departure left me standing in the puddle forming on my entryway floor, the echo of her hushed disclosure about Dad's tangled lies reverberating through the quiet house like ripples in a disturbed pond, stirring up a maelstrom of disbelief and fragmented recollections that pulled me toward the living room couch where I sank down with the weight of implications pressing on my chest, the patter of rain against the window serving as a relentless backdrop to my racing thoughts about how a single business misstep could have cascaded into the favoritism that defined our family dynamics for decades. The next morning dawned gray and sodden, mirroring the fog in my mind as I navigated the school drop-off routine with Tyler, his cheerful obliviousness to the undercurrents of adult drama a stark contrast to the knots twisting in my stomach. And once he was safely inside the building waving from the playground, I turned my attention to bridging the gaps in the story by reaching out to peripheral family members who might hold overlooked pieces of the puzzle, starting with Aunt Marlene up in Cleveland, whose voice carried the gravelly timbre of years spent in factory offices and church choirs. Over a crackling phone line that afternoon during my planning period, Marlene hesitated at first, her responses laced with the caution of someone guarding old wounds, but eventually she opened up about the aftermath of Dad's death, recounting how Mom had shouldered an overwhelming debt from his ill-fated attempt at flipping a rundown duplex on the edge of town. A venture fueled by dreams of financial independence that instead spiraled into loans from shady lenders and forged documents to keep the creditors at bay, choices that Mom justified by pouring every spare dollar into Lisa's real estate training as a hedge against future instability, believing the younger daughter's charisma could turn the tide while viewing my practical bent as too risk-averse to warrant the gamble. Those revelations from Marlene wove seamlessly into the financial breadcrumbs I'd unearthed the day before, painting a vivid portrait of Mom's favoritism as a desperate strategy born from guilt and survival instincts honed in the unforgiving landscape of post-industrial Ohio, where one wrong turn could mean losing the roof over your head and the fragile sense of security that came with it, a reality that resonated deeply with the stories I taught in my history classes about families during the Rust Belt decline, clinging to whatever advantages they could seize amid economic freefalls. Flashbacks assaulted me as I hung up the call and stared out the classroom window at the overcast sky, memories of the funeral reception where Mom clung to Lisa's arm while I circulated with trays of deviled eggs for the mourners, her whispers to my sister about making it all worthwhile now taking on sinister undertones of calculated investment rather than mere emotional solace, and the way Lisa's first commission check arrived like manna just months later, funding Mom's new washing machine and a family vacation to the lake that I remembered as tense and overshadowed by unspoken debts hanging over every conversation. The irony struck me with a hollow laugh that echoed in the empty room, considering how I'd always prided myself on being the uncomplaining pillar, attending night classes in between shifts at the diner to earn my teaching certificate, only to realize that my stability had been subsidized by the very risks Mom avoided assigning to me, a dynamic that now fueled a simmering resolve to expose the inequities without shattering the family entirely, though doubt flickered at the edges about whether such balance was even possible after years of accumulated slights. That evening, after picking up Tyler and enduring his enthusiastic debrief of a science project involving baking soda volcanoes that erupted with fizzy glee in the school gym, I channeled the burgeoning anger into a more targeted form of reprisal, one that struck at the heart of Lisa's professional sanctuary, where her reputation was both shield and sword in the competitive world of suburban sales. Knowing from her social media boasts about an upcoming high-stakes client presentation at the agency, I spent the quiet hours after Tyler's bedtime scouring industry newsletters and anonymous tip lines, then anonymously forwarded a curated dossier of those old lean details from her controversial flip to a rival broker's contact form, framing it as insider concern from a former colleague wary of ethical lapses that could tarnish the local market's integrity. The email sent with a generic signature that blended seamlessly into the digital ether without a trace back to me. The act carried the thrill of a well-plotted heist from those noir films Dad used to watch on late-night TV, a clever undercutting that promised to inject just enough uncertainty into her big meeting to force her to second-guess her untouchable status. And as I hit send from my laptop in the dim kitchen light, a wry satisfaction bloomed, imagining her poring over spreadsheets the next morning with newfound paranoia, her polished pitches laced with the subtle tremor of exposed vulnerabilities. Yet the victory felt bittersweet almost immediately, the glow fading into a pang of remorse as I considered the ripple effects on Mom, who still idolized Lisa's trajectory as her own redemption, leaving me to wonder if my quest for justice was carving deeper divides or merely illuminating paths toward reconciliation that neither of us had dared to tread. The backlash arrived sooner than anticipated, manifesting in a terse voicemail from my principal during dinner preparations. Her voice measured, but edged with concern about rumors circulating in the tight-knit educator community regarding family entanglements that could affect my professional demeanor. A subtle warning that the agency's scramble had bled into broader gossip networks, turning my private vendetta into an unintended spotlight on our shared surname. Rattled but undeterred, I plated spaghetti for Tyler and myself, the steam rising in comforting spirals that belied the turmoil churning inside. But the fragile normalcy shattered when Lisa materialized in the grocery store parking lot that same evening. Her car pulling up beside mine as I loaded bags into the trunk under the harsh fluorescence of the lot's lamps, her face a mask of controlled fury as she accused me outright of sabotaging her career with the leaked information, her words tumbling out in a heated rush that drew glances from passing shoppers pushing carts laden with weekly staples. I maintained a facade of wide-eyed innocence, protesting that she must be mistaking me for some office rival nursing a grudge, but she leaned in closer, her breath visible in the cooling air, and unleashed a partial confession that twisted the knife deeper. That mom's favoritism stemmed from a profound guilt over choosing to back Lisa after Dad's collapse because she saw echoes of his ambition in her drive, while perceiving me as too cautious to handle the family's precarious ledge, a choice that had preserved our home, but at the cost of my unacknowledged sacrifices. The argument escalated right there amid the idling engines and distant announcements over the store intercom, our voices rising in a symphony of recriminations until she shoved her overflowing cart toward her vehicle with a final barb about how my safe life masked a deeper resentment that poisoned everything it touched, abandoning me in the lot with the weight of her words and a gnawing curiosity about the full extent of Mom's remorseful decisions. Later that night, as thunder rumbled in the distance and lightning flickered through the curtains like erratic camera flashes, an anonymous email notification pierced the quiet of my bedroom, the subject line reading "Look closer to home," with an attachment that unfolded into a scanned photograph of me at 15, arms slung around Dad's shoulders during a rare fishing trip to the Mad River, his smile broad, but eyes shadowed with worry I now recognized as the prelude to his unraveling. Accompanied by a cryptic note instructing me to search the attic at Mom's for the answers that would explain why I'd been the invisible anchor in their storm, a directive that sent shivers down my spine and left me staring at the screen long after the storm passed, teetering on the brink of a personal revelation that could either vindicate my path or indict me as complicit in the family's long silence. That anonymous email with its haunting photograph of Dad and me by the Mad River lingered on my phone screen like a spectral invitation to unearth the bones of our family's buried narrative. Its cryptic directive to search Mom's attic pulling me from a night of fitful dreams where faces from the past swirled in a vortex of accusations and half-remembered embraces, awakening me to a dawn that filtered through rain-streaked windows with a pallor that matched the dread coiling in my gut as I prepared Tyler for school with mechanical efficiency, his innocent questions about weekend plans brushing against my preoccupation like whispers in a storm. Once he was off with his backpack slung over one shoulder, waving from the bus stop with that gap-toothed grin that always melted my resolve, I drove to Mom's house under skies, still heavy with the remnants of last night's tempest, the wipers swishing rhythmically against the drizzle as my mind raced through the implications of the photos. Timing me at 15, just months before Dad's collapse, his arm around me protective yet strained, hinting at burdens he carried alone to shield us from the fallout of his speculative ventures that had entangled our finances in knots tighter than the fishing line we'd tangled that day by the water's edge. Parking in the driveway where puddles reflected the overcast heavens like fractured mirrors, I let myself in with the spare key that felt heavier in my palm than usual. The house silent except for the distant tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway that Dad had restored himself during one of his optimistic phases, a relic now standing sentinel over secrets long interred. Ascending the pull-down stairs to the attic with a flashlight in hand, the air up there thick with the musty scent of aged paper and moth-eaten fabrics that evoked forgotten holidays and the boxed dreams of childhood. I navigated the cluttered space by beams of light cutting through dust-laden moats, My sneakers scuffing against plywood floors littered with holiday decorations and yellowed albums until I located the far corner where family heirlooms gathered dust in unlabeled crates, the one marked simply with Dad's initials drawing me like a magnet to its weathered lid. Prying it open revealed a treasure trove of documents tied with faded twine, bank statements chronicling withdrawals that aligned with his desperate real estate gambles, letters in his looping script pleading with Mom not to burden Lisa with the details of the mounting debts from a botched partnership that promised quick flips, but delivered only liens and lawsuits, and, crucially, a sealed envelope addressed to me alone. Its contents unfolding to expose how Dad's final push for financial security had been inspired by my quiet aspirations for college and a stable future. His heart strained not just by the physical toll of factory work, but by the emotional weight of failing to provide the launchpad he envisioned for his eldest daughter. A failure he masked by confiding in Mom to redirect resources toward Lisa's bolder path as a way to salvage some legacy from the wreckage. The words blurred through tears that welled unbidden, revealing Mom's favoritism as a convoluted shield woven from guilt over Dad's choices, where she amplified Lisa's successes to honor his ambitions indirectly while downplaying mine to avoid confronting how my steadfast presence had been the true anchor holding them afloat. A dynamic that now cast my lifelong sacrifices in a light of unwitting complicity rather than victimhood, leaving me slumped against a beam with the papers clutched in trembling hands as the attic's shadows seemed to close in with the weight of truths too long deferred. Descending those stairs felt like emerging from a confessional booth into the harsh light of accountability, the bundle of letters tucked into my jacket as I confronted Mom in the kitchen where she stood at the sink rinsing mugs from breakfast, her back stiffening at my approach before she turned with eyes that mirrored my own turmoil, the air between us charged with the electricity of impending catharsis as I spread the documents on the scarred oak table that had witnessed so many meals laced with unspoken tensions. Her face crumpled under the assault of evidence, confessions spilling forth in a torrent that filled the room with the raw ache of years suppressed. She admitted to the insurance sleight of hand after Dad's death to cover the debts he'd hidden, funneling the proceeds into Lisa's training as a desperate bid to create a safety net from the ruins, believing my practical nature would endure without the spotlight while Lisa's drive echoed Dad's lost potential, a choice born from love twisted by fear that revealing the full extent to me would shatter the illusion of stability we'd all clung to amid the economic hardships that gripped our community like a vice. As her voice broke on details of sleepless nights balancing ledgers and placating creditors who knocked at odd hours, I felt the ground shift beneath our shared history, the favoritism no longer a cold dismissal, but a flawed armor forged in crisis. Yet the revelation only deepened the uncertainty about forgiveness, stirring a complex brew of empathy for her burdens and resentment for the isolation it imposed on my path, the kind that resonated with the stories of resilient women in my history. Lessons who navigated family legacies with grace, but at personal cost. Summoning Lisa via a terse text that bypassed our recent animosities, I watched her arrive through the lace curtains, her SUV crunching gravel in the driveway with the reluctance of someone stealing for battle. And as she entered the kitchen, the atmosphere thickened into a pressure cooker of familial reckoning, the three of us arrayed around the table like participants in a long-overdue intervention where accusations flew initially like sparks from a frayed wire. Lisa defending her role as the unwitting beneficiary who had shouldered the pressure of Mom's expectations without full knowledge, Mom dissolving into sobs that bridged the gap between her stoic facade and the vulnerability she'd armored against, and me laying bare the letter's indictments with a voice steady but laced with the hurt of being the unseen cornerstone. The confrontation escalated into a symphony of raised voices and interrupted pleas, rain resuming its drumbeat on the roof as if underscoring the storm within until exhaustion tempered the fury into halting admissions, Lisa revealing fragments of her own guilt over accepting the advantages without question, Mom begging for absolution in the name of the love that had driven her flawed decisions, and me grappling with the mirror they held up to my own choices, the safe harbor I'd built for Tyler now questioned as potentially an echo of the caution that had sidelined me from greater risks and rewards. In the midst of that emotional maelstrom, my ultimate act of retribution crystallized not in destruction, but in a subtle dissemination of truth that forced the family's veils to lift collectively. Slipping my phone from my pocket to record snippets of the raw exchange with the discretion of a hidden diary entry, then later that evening uploading anonymized excerpts to our high school alumni forum under a neutral pseudonym, framing them as reflections on inherited secrets and the hidden costs of parental pride in a post titled, "When Family Facades Crack, Lessons from the Heartland." The shares designed to ripple through our interconnected social circles without naming names, but potent enough to prompt inquiries and conversations that would compel Lisa and Mom to confront the broader narrative beyond our walls. The move carried the wit of irony, turning the spotlight they'd long reserved for Lisa's triumphs onto the collective shadows we'd all inhabited, a satisfying release that echoed the clever jabs of prior days, but amplified into something transformative. Yet as notifications buzzed with responses from old classmates offering support and shared stories, a wave of ambivalence washed over me during the drive home with Tyler dozing in the passenger seat, the road ahead shrouded in twilight mist that mirrored the ambiguities unresolved. Had this exposure healed the rifts or merely exposed new fractures? And in seeking revenge through revelation, had I liberated us from the past or bound us tighter in its chains, leaving the question of true strength hanging like the last note of an unfinished symphony, one that invites you to ponder whether the overlooked siblings' quiet fire ultimately forges the strongest path or simply illuminates the ruins left in its wake.